the spirits had asked if she knew what hell looked like. And she responded no, and they asked if she'd like to see it.
Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. It's Maggie and Lisa again with Unexplained. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today we have a special guest, Justin. He is here and he's going to tell us some stories, some experiences he had. So let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us today, Justin. We are ecstatic to have you and to hear your stories and everything like that.
Well, thanks for having me.
No problem. So tell me what got you interested in the paranormal. What kind of stories do you have for us?
Well, let's be honest, it's kind of a lack of interest, mostly due to the long history that I have, my old family stories that I'm about to tell you. Now, I will preface this by saying that a lot of these stories they're old family stories. It's exactly what they are. It's things that my mom told me when I was young. My uncle has told me. Everybody that was actually involved in it, are all passed away. All the true parts of the story all kind of went to the grave. So take it for what you will. These are just the old family stories that I have to tell, and they're fun to talk about.
Awesome.
So I looked something up. My great-grandmother was a medium back in between the 50s and the 70s. She would host seances. She used Ouija boards to communicate with the other side, and not like the Parker Brothers ones. I'm talking the real old wood ones where, you could flat out see ghosts coming out of this thing. One of her big things was using protection to keep from, anything they communicated with. It would keep them on the right track from being, having something take over them, having something follow them home, God forbid. And this is something, even telling these stories kind of freaks me out. So, you can hear it in my voice. I'm a little shaky about it, but there was something that my great-grandma was big on, was the white light of protection. And I actually looked it up because I didn't really know a whole lot about it, but I looked it up and I wanted to read it before we get started, just to, let's play it safe. I'm an iron worker and I wouldn't work in heights without being tied off. It's the same thing. I wouldn't do something like this without some form of safety.
Yeah, we understand that.
I wanted to read this and, let me just get right down to it. The white light of protection prayer. I now ask for myself, my hosts Lisa and Maggie, and anyone viewing this podcast to be surrounded by divine light, with my team of guides, angels, and ascended masters, with the archangels and angels who can most support us now. Surround us fully and completely with divine light. I ask that the white light fill and surround us, completely cleansing and purifying our minds, bodies, and spirits. Protect us, allowing the pure divine guidance of our guides, angels, and archangels to flow through it and yet block out any and all negativity, lower vibrational energy, or entities. I ask this according to the divine will, for the highest and greatest good, in the highest interest of all, and so it is. I'll try and save the real juicy stuff for the end, but I've got a couple of stories that just weird things that happen, and it's multiple generations that this has been happening. All the way down to my little brother, who's 4 years younger than me. My mom tells me about this. We had this old, you know what a buffet is? It's a piece of furniture. It's a big square thing that they used to serve food off of. It's got full of drawers, and my brother, when he was about a year old, used to climb under this thing, and right when he was learning how to talk, my mom said that she'd hear him. One day she heard him just jawing away, as a little kid does. But she heard him, having a conversation, which is odd for a kid his age anyway. and he was asking questions, he was saying things, and then it's almost like he was hearing somebody else have the other end of the conversation. She says, "Who are you talking to?" Well, and he turned to her and said, "I'm Special Chuck." She said, "Special Chuck," and she started thinking about it. My great grandfather, his name was Charles Calvin. With the family, he always went by CC, and nobody called him Chuck. But everybody outside of the house, that's what they called him, was Chuck.
Wow.
So there was a prime evidence of, you know, he was having some kind of communication. There was some kind of, he was talking to my great grandfather, who had passed away years ago.
Wow.
Well before our time.
Your mom must have been freaked out at that point.
Yeah, especially considering that she's the one that knows all these stories, so she's the one that told them to us. She knows this isn't anything to mess around with. So when she sees stuff, she picks up on it quick.
And I'm sorry, you said that that was your grandma that used the Ouija board?
Yes.
Okay, and you said that was around the 1950s?
Between the 50s and 70s. She did it for a long time. And the stories I got, I mean, there was a lot of people from Chicago, all the way up in Milwaukee, way up in Michigan. People would come, and she lived right close to where we're at. Yeah, people would come from all around to, you know, have her host seances and communicate with the other side.
Yeah, that's around the time it was popular, from the research I did. Around I believe it was around 1944, they sold about 50,000 Ouija boards.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it does stem from a traumatic event. From the first Civil War to the second Civil War, they were selling Ouija boards like crazy because the loved ones wanted to hear from their loved ones that passed. So yeah, so it was popular around that era.
I didn't know that. And it all, you know, they say that a lot of this came to light when the movie The Exorcist came out. You know, that's when a lot of this stuff came up. But the stories had to come from somewhere. This wasn't just something they made up for the movie. So.
Right.
Yeah, around the Exorcist time, that's when many Catholics and even spiritualists came out against the Ouija board, saying it's evil. But yeah, it did stem from that movie.
There's a couple of different types of, I guess you can say, Ouija boards that people use. Like the old one that Justin was talking about. They try to use the one actually made from Hasbro, you know, the toy one. They try anything, but me and Lisa actually tried some type of, I don't know, would you call it a Ouija board or would you call it some kind of communication device? I'm not sure. When we went to the Senator Humphreys. Yeah,
I remember that. That was the first time we ever did it, Mags. I think that was the only time too.
Yeah.
You know, Maggie and I, we both were not big on it, but we went ahead and did some kind of Ouija board. It was an old-fashioned Ouija board that was set up by Edward Shanahan. He's a psychic. So we did one with using glass.
Yeah, it was a glass turned upside down, and we each had to, just like you would do with the plaque on the Ouija board, you would have to touch it. But it was just an upside down glass, and we used that. I can't remember. The table that we used was round, and I think it had some significance to that. For some reason, that's what I'm thinking. I can't remember, but yeah, we got some pretty good answers, like relevant answers to the house that we were investigating in. So it was pretty interesting. And I believe, Justin, we did say some kind of cleansing prayer after this investigation, just like, you know, kind of brings that white light kind of prayer thing to someone's attention, you know, that this is something that we do after investigations and things that of that nature, like the Ouija board and seances and things like that. So your grandma was definitely doing something right there, because we do that too.
Well, and the last story I've got to tell is kind of what happens when you don't use that protection.
Right. I can only imagine.
This one, I had to call. My mom always had like the little snippets of stories. She always had, well, I remember this part of it, I remember that. And she always said, oh, your uncle, who's her brother that's a year and a half older than her, he knows more. You can just call him and ask him. Well, I called him and asked him about it. Now, I'm 38 years old and have been close with him my entire life and never asked about it. I mean, every time I hear these stories, it's like, don't ask. We don't need to know about that.
Yeah.
Well, I actually called him and asked him, and he's now retired and loves to talk. So I knew if I got started, I'd have to get a notepad out and just set the phone down and turn him loose. We did talk for about 3.5 hours that night. But the first thing he said was, I was always too scared to ask about that stuff. He's like, you got to think that stuff happened when he was a kid, in the 60s and early 70s. He said that was scarier than any horror movie you're ever going to see. So he didn't really have many more details than my mom. He did have a couple of real bangers that scared the crap out of me and hearing them as an adult. Apparently, my grandfather, who the woman we're talking about is my great-grandmother, and her son, my grandfather, was in a car accident, and I think he was like in his mid-30s. So, I mean, he had kids at this point, but he was a younger adult than he is now by a long shot. He was in a car accident, and apparently what had happened was he was going over a bridge. It was icy. The cars, they slid into each other, threw him out of the car, and when the ambulance got there, they only had enough room for like 2 gurneys to slide into the back of it. Well, the 2 people that were injured in the other car were, they were somebody they could save, so they put them on the gurneys. They thought my grandfather was dead. He had no heartbeat. He wasn't breathing, anything. A big, massive head trauma. But, I mean, these are the old days. They were thinking, well, it's cold out here. Why don't we throw this guy in between the 2 gurneys so at least we don't have to come back out here in the middle of the night when it's cold to come pick up his body. This is before they did big crime scenes and all that stuff. An ambulance went out and scooped the bodies up. So the story is they put him in the back of the ambulance, and when they get to the hospital, they had wheeled the 2 gurneys out with the other people and brought them in. And apparently they had, drinking coffee and, oh, well, let's go get the other guy out and we'll take him to the morgue. And the nurses were just losing it. Like, I can't believe, why would you leave him in the back of the ambulance? Why wouldn't you bring him in? Oh, well, he's not breathing. He had no heartbeat. They brought him back in, and he came back to life. Now, he was still, he wasn't conscious or anything. He was just, his heart started beating, and he started breathing again. Mind you, these are, Chinese telephone stories, and I don't have many details of it. But my great-grandmother came to the hospital and was sitting next to him as he was out cold after the accident, and he starts talking audibly while still in his sleep. I don't want to go back. Don't make me go back. It's so warm and nice here. Don't make me go back. Please don't make me go back. And the story is he was talking to somebody on the other side. He was like right in between and was just fighting. Hey, this is it. I don't want to go back. And they said, no, your time's not done here. You have more things to do. That was the story he told.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. And it's things like that a lot of people like search for answers for. They want to know, what is there an afterlife? Like, what do people see? So that's pretty interesting that your grandmother actually heard him say all this stuff. Does he remember like seeing anything at all, or does she just remember him like, okay, that's pretty cool?
No, he says he doesn't remember anything. It's just that's what they were gathering from it, was he was talking to somebody from the other side.
Wow.
I believe it. I used to date a paramedic that didn't believe in the afterlife, didn't believe in angels, none of that, none of the supernatural. And he used to ask people that died, and they brought back to life, he used to ask them, what did you see? Did you see anything? Some would say they didn't see anything. There was just black. Others said that they saw themselves floating up. So one night, this man happened to pass away in the ambulance, and they're working on him, and they're able to bring him back to life. So he asked that man, what did you see? So he said, oh, I was floating up above the ambulance. And he didn't believe him. He said, okay. Now, these ambulances were like, the roof of it was like 8 foot. You know, you had to climb up a ladder to actually get onto the roof. And the number of the ambulances were on top of the ambulance. So he asked him, he said, okay, so you're floating up above the ambulance. What was the number? And the man told him the number 8. And that was the number of the ambulance.
Wow.
So after that, he became more open-minded.
Wow, that gave me the chills.
True story.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah, it
So,
does
yeah.
happen. I feel like there's definitely an afterlife. I do believe in heaven and hell, and I do believe that, you know, you go to another side afterwards. And I feel like the people who are stuck here, like spirits and whatnot, they're just kind of lost souls, and that's who we try to communicate with, and we try to see like why they're here. And that's where our passion comes from, me and Lisa's passion. Why are these poor souls still here? Why haven't they crossed over? So yeah, it's really cool to hear stories like that, because, you know, that just gives you proof that there is an afterlife.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and some people, I mean, they're really scared of like paranormal devices, you know, contacting the dead. But like the Ouija board, it didn't come from something malevolent or something sinister. It did start off as something innocent. You know, they wanted to contact their loved ones that died. It's a really sad story because, you know, how it came about, because of course, you know, these are people who really loved their spouse, their kids, and they wanted to make contact with them. That's like something really innocent. But
Yeah.
somehow it was turned to something sinister. And I mean, it's something that I really don't mess around with. I don't judge people who do.
Yeah.
But they say that it's good if you have some kind of, I don't want to say experience. It's like, I forgot the word.
Kind of like you know what you're doing, sort
Yeah,
of thing.
something like that. But
Yeah,
how? I mean, how do you know what you're doing? I mean, how do you get that?
I know. I
There's
know.
no
I mean,
process.
I think with the Ouija board, a lot of people, I guess the word is unexperienced, and they kind of open portals to things that they don't want. And they just kind of, you know, they play around with it, and they like say crazy off the wall things sometimes, because either A, they don't believe it's real, so they don't think anything's going to happen, or B, they just don't know what they're doing and they open some kind of portal. So I think that's where like the sinister stuff comes out. I don't know. Like you said earlier, me and Lisa don't really meddle in the Ouija board things, because, you know, we just don't want to open any can of worms or portals per se. So, but I think that's why it ends up being bad at the end for some people.
And
Yeah,
that's
like
why
we
I
were
wanted to really push that the white light of protection. You know, that's something
Mhm.
that, and I wrote it out here, and I can send it. You know, that's something that I can't believe I got this far without me having it. You know, I mean, that's something you can use. I mean, just in your daily, you know, some kind of a mantra, something to, you know, you're walking around, you don't know what you're walking into. I mean, I
Right.
spent a lot of time in steel mills. You have no idea how many people have died there, how many spirits are still there. You hear so many stories in the steel mills of doors slamming and stuff going on, things getting knocked off the shelves, and they just, the you know, the rumble of the crane going by knocked it over. But all those people died there, you know, over the last, 120 years, as long as those things been around. You never know what you might walk into, what might follow you home. So it's definitely, it's something to, you know, something that's good to carry with you.
I agree.
All right, I got another story here. Let's see. My uncle, who I called and asked these details about, he was telling me a story about when he was a little kid. He was terrified of the dark. Absolutely, like had to have lights on in every room he was in, and his parents always just kind of shoved it off as, well, kid's afraid of dark. It is what it is. This again was another story that I didn't hear until just recently, while I was on the phone with him. When he was more of an adult, somewhere in his 20s, he went by great grandma's house while she was having one of her parties, where she was having her people over and having a seance, or they were doing something. And him and his wife at the time stopped by the house, and he sat down and was talking to all the guests, and somehow they got onto the conversation about how he was afraid of the dark when he was a kid, and they started prodding him and like, well, what made you afraid of the dark? Why were you so terrified of it? And he had gotten, when he really dug into it, because I mean, you think about it, a little kid, he can't really pull out details of, why are you afraid of dogs? I don't know. One barked at him when he was in a stroller. It got down to the point where he was telling a story of, he had this, like a vision almost, of being a little kid. Now, my family's Norwegian. We come from a lot of sailors and the Vikings. Well, Vikings, not the people that, we came over here on boats. Everything that apparently my ancestors had a lot to do with sailing and all that. He had a vision when he was a little kid of being on a ship, almost like a cabin boy, just a little kid on the boat. And the boat was, he was being like raided, almost like by pirates or something like that. And he went down into the bowels of the ship and got into like an apple barrel and was hiding in it. And he could hear rumbling, like people walking around outside of the barrel, and he was hiding, and he was holding himself tight. And he said the last thing he remembered was the top of the barrel come off and a knife come down, and it went black. And ever since then, he was terrified of the dark. And everybody in that room was that's a past life experience. You aren't just dreaming. That was something that happened to you. So,
Oh wow. Do you
like I said,
believe
this is
past
multi-generational stories.
Do you believe that there's past lives, that we all lived one before?
Oh, for sure. Especially hearing stories like that. I don't have any experience with it, but I mean, there's a lot of things I don't have experience with.
Right. How about you, Elise? What do you think?
Oh, I'm open to it, but I really don't know. I mean, I've seen shows before where a girl is saying that, I mean, she's like going into detail about a past life.
Mm-hmm.
And they took that girl to meet the family of someone that died. I can't recall. It was years ago, maybe when I was a teenager when I watched it, but they took her to the family, and she was giving them all these details of what had happened to this one person that died in the family, and they were astonished. They didn't know how she had all that information. So I'm open to it.
Yeah, me too. I've never had any experience where, I had a dream or a vision or whatever the case is, thinking that it may have been a past life, but I'm open to that. I'm open to the possibility. I'm sure people have experienced that before. So I think it's really interesting, though. I think it's so cool that people actually have these visions of them living in a different era. I think it's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, maybe days I'll have one.
Yeah, and there's psychics, Mags, like that can tell you if you're an old soul or a young soul.
Yeah.
And sometimes the old souls, they do act a little grown up, and then the young souls act a little foolish like me. No. But yeah, I mean we with Edward Shanahan, he was able to tell you if you're a young soul, old soul. And I think we came across other people that were psychic that were able to tell. So it's interesting.
That's my son for sure. He's 2.5 going on 20. That boy's, he's got a lot going on. I'm going to tell a story about my great-grandmother that this is where it gets muddy. You know, this is where nobody has any real details. So I can tell you, you know, piece together snippets of everything everyone's told me. Like I said, she was a medium. She would have people come from all over the Midwest, would come to meet with her in her home, and she would host seances. They would get into all kinds of stuff. She called them parties, and she was, you know, that was part of her job. That's what she did. She would charge money. She would host these parties, dinner, drinks, the whole thing, and then they would get down to business. And she always did that white light of protection prayer that I read at the top. But apparently, the way the story goes is the one night that she kind of spaced and didn't really, just forgot to read it. I don't know. Sometimes you just, you know, you forget to do the first step of the process.
Right.
She had summoned some spirits. When you don't do the protection prayer, there's nothing watching over to make sure that the right spirits get in, because there are safe, you know, parts of the afterlife to communicate with, but there's some pretty malevolent, nasty things out there that, you know, if you let them in, there's, you know, once you open that door, there's no closing it. You know, that stuff gets in, it could follow you around the rest of your life. It could ruin all kinds of things. These spirits had asked if she knew what hell looked like. And she responded no, and they asked if she'd like to see it. And she said, well, I'm terrified. I don't know if I want to see that. And they said, well, we can show you what hell looks like, but you have to trust us that we'll bring you back and we'll protect you. But if you get scared, if you don't follow our lead, we will leave you there. And the story is Grandma had a complete mental breakdown for like 4 days after that, and woke up telling stories of all the screaming and fire and horrible things that happened while she was out. I mean, my grandfather was watching her during the day. Her brother was watching her at night, and she was tossing and turning and talking in her sleep and saying just horrible things. And she was so scared, and there was nothing anybody could do for her. They knew if they took her to a doctor, they would just have her locked up.
Right.
And that's not what they were trying to do. They knew what happened, so they had to muscle her through it. She came out on the other side, but she was always different after that. You know, the story was they, you know, she started being much, you know, she was much more careful, but at the same time, she was much more reserved after that. She was living fast and loose with her experience with the afterlife before that. And after that, she was very, it was like a brush with death, but it was so much worse than death, because it was seeing what comes after if if you deserve an afterlife like that. And that was the story. That was the big one that scared the crap out of the little kids in the family, that we don't mess with any of that stuff because of that story right there. If you let the wrong stuff in, you might not get out of it. Yeah,
that's one of the reasons why I don't mess with it. Even, I mean, we'll do the prayer and everything, but still, it's just something about it there. I feel like, it just conjured up some kind of portal to, you never know what, it can be something evil, it can be, something good, you never know. And I'm not ready to play that Russian roulette game with the Ouija board. So yeah. Wow. So after that, so your grandma still did like the seances and the parties and everything, but not as I guess you can say, like, often. I don't know.
I think it was more of she was more careful of who she would have at the parties, because I mean everybody brings their own energy, and
yeah,
I mean, if people are there and they're skeptical, maybe people are there and they're they're looking for something that they're not going to get. If they're there just to, have bad energy and want to see what the ugly side of the afterlife is, I mean, you don't have to say it out loud for it to come out that way.
Yeah.
And I think she was much more selective on who she had, on what she was doing, and how safely she was doing it. There is a happy ending to the story. You know, she lived a long life. She died well into her 90s. You know, she passed away quietly in a hospital bed, surrounded by her family, just like, you know, the storybook ending, I suppose. She had a good shake to her, and we used to give her Jell-O and a fork at Christmas time, and it was, I know this is a terrible thing to do, but it was funny.
I'm sure she didn't mind the laugh she gave with that.
Oh, no, she had a blast. Grandma loved parties.
Yeah,
Well,
and sometimes we get involved in the paranormal without our consent. I mean, that's what happened to me, you know, in the past. I came across haunted homes, and that's really what inspired me to ghost hunt. I'm not sure if I told you that, Justin. I know Maggie knows.
No. I found out later that I lived in a haunted house. Me and an ex-girlfriend, my dad owns rental homes, and I rented one from him in Valpo. It was a 110-year-old house, a beautiful old place, and the woman I was living with, I would be at work, and she'd say, you know, I keep hearing weird things in that back bedroom. I was, is the cat in there? We had a cat at the time. No, the cat was sitting right next to me, and I just kept hearing, like, shuffling in that back bedroom. I come home one day, and she says, what are you doing? How are you just now getting home? I just saw you walk past the bedroom door like 45 minutes ago. Said, I just walked in the door. And the final step before we moved out of there was we were both sitting on the couch. The cat was right next to us, and we heard this smash come from the back bedroom. We go back there, and her glass cross that she had gotten from her grandmother was whipped across the room and smashed into the other wall.
oh no.
And I called my mom about it. I'm like, do you know that this place is haunted? Like, I'm serious, something's going on here. She goes, oh yeah, like 3 other people that lived there said that they had,
Oh
was
my
it the
gosh.
back bedroom? I said, yeah, it was the back bedroom. She goes, yeah, I think that place is haunted. I'm like, thanks for telling me, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, we moved out of there quick.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
That sounds kind of fun for Mags and me.
Yeah, exactly.
And we don't own that house anymore, so.
Yeah, I was doing some research, and some scientists have looked into the Ouija board, and they say that they believe that, of course, you know, that doesn't have anything to do with spirits, but they believe our subconscious is so powerful that it can create different scenarios and answers and so on. So yeah, everyone has a different aspect to it, but you know, there have been paranormal investigators that went deep with the Ouija board, where they were thrown across the room, something grabbed them. I mean, crazy stuff had happened, and they believe it's because they used the Ouija board. So who knows?
I strongly believe that it has power to open some kind of portals, and you just never know what can come out of that. And like you were saying, you need to like have some kind of, I don't know, experience to actually work the board right. You know what I mean? I wouldn't do it willy-nilly. And this is your warning to whoever's watching and who wants to go and play with the Ouija board just willy-nilly. Don't do it. And if you do it, say a prayer beforehand and say goodbye after you're done playing.
So yeah, always close off, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Justin, for coming on. Those were amazing stories, and thank you for sharing them.
Thanks for having me. This was my first podcast. I was really looking forward to it. So I had a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it was awesome having you. So, you guys, please like and subscribe. Let us know how you like Justin's stories down below in the comments, and we will see you guys next time. See ya.
See ya. See you next time.
You can watch me at twitch.tv/snapkick37. And I play all kinds of games. I really like to interact and chat. And sometimes I just put a camera in front of my fish tank and play some fun music. So it's nice, chill. It's a good time.